campaign. Thank you everybody for joining. This is Pietro Paganini, and this is a webinar of Competere.eu, and it's one of the new series that we have launched back in April that is called Sustainable Nutrition. And today we're going to talk about claims and labels ahead or within what is going to happen next in Brussels, the farm to fork strategy, this great revolution, this great development the European Commission has just launched that will probably, keep busy many of us and many of you for the next, I wouldn't say months, but probably years. And it's going in a way to, impact on the entire food community and the entire world, I would say, the entire globe, because it's really a great challenge that Europe is, and that is the merit, and we should give credit to the Commission for taking it. So I see that people are joining. Don't forget, we are also live on Facebook. On Facebook, you can't make questions or you cannot get answered. Here on Zoom, if you join us on Zoom, you can be definitely part of the conversation. Why is it sustainable nutrition? Well, we call it sustainable nutrition for one simple reason, because it's where the direction is going, of course, about sustainability. But we start from a different point. It's not the books of the dreams where we start. Is not an ideological approach that we have, but we start from the fact that there are 7.6 billion people on this planet, and I will never be tired of repeating it. 7.6 billion people. It's a huge number. And if we compare this with Europe, Europe is going to start this farm to fork. But how many people we have in Europe? 300 million. 300 million against 7.3 billion. We're going to 10 billion in a few years from now. And these are people that have the right to nurture themselves, their right to prosper, and they have the right to do it by copying what we are doing in Europe. And that's a big challenge that we have, because on the other side, we have to protect sustainability, or we have to promote sustainability. And in order to, to nurture 7.6 billion people, we need land to farm, or we need innovation. One of the two or both, or we need to implement and improve productivity to reduce the land that we consume, and on the other side to make more innovation. This is our starting point, and we have been challenging this from different perspectives in the past few weeks in English and in Italian. We've been discussing, the biodiversity issues, particularly in Southeast Asia, but we have also been discussing in Italian labels and claims. And today we're going to do it in English. In more a Brussels perspective, I had exactly what I said earlier of the farm to fork. And we're going to do this with two great speakers that we have. One is a friend of us, is Professor Giorgio Donegani, that is based in Milan and is actually speaking from Milan. Next to be a food nutritionist and technologist, the food technologist, is also a great musician, as you can see from the back. And then we have wonderful Aude that works for, is an attorney at law at Daldewolf in Brussels. And besides being a great lawyer, can I say this? She's a tiger. So I'm happy I'm not a lawyer, because if I meet her in court, she is terrific. She wins everything. So keep in mind, Aude is great when it comes to label and claim. He's probably one of the best in Brussels, and definitely one of the best most prepared lawyers in the entire Europe. And I'm so great to have her here. We met with Aude back last year in Brussels, where we discussed the free from claims, and it was a beautiful discussion that we have physically. Unfortunately, we cannot be physically present. We have to be virtually present, and we will keep doing this, and we see it works. And thanks for joining us. So let's go to Giorgio, and let's start, and let's go into the debate, so you guys are tired of listening to me. Giorgio, claims and labels are more and more relevant, and have been more and more relevant in the past years in the food industry. And today, when we talk about farm to fork, we definitely have to talk about labels and claims. And this is dealing with consumers, how consumers are behaving. And in the past years, we have been discussing who is actually making these labels and claims so important. And you will tell this to us, but we heard companies saying, we are doing this because the consumers are asking us for that. And we heard consumers saying, well, we get this information from companies or from media or from commercials. So we went from the with food, with more sugar, with more salt, with more protein, into something totally opposite, the free from food. So we got the free from gluten, the free from lactose, from GMO, from eggs, from sugar, from peanut, from palm oil, from wheat, for carb-free, from caffeine, from salt, from dairy, from meat, and so on. How many free products we have out there. And now the European Union, the European Commission is coming back saying, look, we're going into a great revolution. We hope, and I want to stress this is going to be a multi-stakeholder discussion, because as I said, 7.6 billion out there, 300 million in Europe. It cannot be a Europe-focused discussion. But Giorgio, where is Europe going and heading with this revolution that is definitely touching upon claims and labels?
Yes.
And you have the presentation.
Yes, I have a presentation.
You have improved.
I try to share my there, this one. I think you can share screen. Okay. Can you see it?
No. I promise we tested it, huh?
Of course, we have just
back in September.
Okay, here it is. I think now you can see.
Yeah,
it.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much, Pietro, for inviting me. It's a complicated situation. I can talk about my job in Italy, and as a food technologist and nutrition expert, I help food companies to produce new, healthy, and sustainable foods. This is the first step of my job, because the most difficult part is therefore to find an effective way to communicate the properties of the new products that we put on the market. This means to talk about food labels and claims, because today it's very difficult for a producer to speak clearly to consumers. And on the other hand, it's very difficult for a consumer to understand the real quality of the food by just reading the labels. I really hope that the Farm to Fork strategy will improve the situation. And I think it will depend on some choices that we will have to make in the next 4 years, no more. Really, Farm to Fork is a very important part of the European Green Deal that is strongly related with the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations and the new Common Agricultural Policy we are waiting for. It's a complex landscape, and if we want to be successful, I think we must establish a new agreement between all the players in the agri-food system, and it must be an agreement based on a shared idea of food quality and the sustainability of the food system. And we need a consistency and effectiveness in communicating this idea of quality at every level. So let's try to define a shared idea of food quality. Until a few years ago, what the quality was related only to safety of the food, to its taste, and to its nutritional value. Quality simply was a generic attribute related with our personal satisfaction. Now it's different. Farm to Fork promotes a qualitative leap. Of course, I want my food is safe, good, nutritious, and also rewarding. But it's not enough. It must be also be produced with respect for the environment, and it is respectful of ethical principles. And in farm, in one word, we can say the food of the future must be sustainable. And in Farm to Fork, we can find many words that clearly define what sustainability is. Words such as biodiversity, fair trade, animal welfare, organic and precision agriculture, short supply chain. But this quality leap requires a strong commitment. A strong commitment that involves either the world of production and the world of consumption of food. Producers must find an effective way to communicate the real value of their products in terms of sustainability. And the consumers must improve their level of awareness in order to understand the real value about the food. And so we have to talk, just a minute, thank you. We have to talk about communication. No? It's a communication program. But in the last 20 years, communication has dramatically changed with the success of social media. Vertical communication, where the expert speaks to the public, has turned into a non-intermediated horizontal communication in which everyone is an expert. And this is a very big problem because due to these changes in communication, the health and nutritional claims, good in the intentions, have produced perverse effects. The times of scientific research are much slower than the rhythms imposed by the market. Communication is very fast, too fast. So in some cases, scientific research has stopped. An example are probiotic foods. Nothing in investing time and resources in research about probiotic now. It's more comfortable to choose a claim such as vitamin B6 is good for immunity system, and add this vitamin to probiotics food and use this claim. Claims have often become a shortcut for judging the entire quality of food, even they concern only a single aspect of its composition. In this way, the actual claims indirectly support a magical thought, I think, that it's based on a quantity of fake news and divides food into medicines and poisons. A thought that is successful because it's simple, it's reassuring, it's fascinating, but I think it's very, very dangerous. So what we can do? I think we have to reestablish the dialogue between those who produce and those who consume through a circular communication that points to restore trust and to create a space of shared knowledge here, not here or just here, a shared knowledge in which producer, experts, and consumers can dialogue, and in which citizens can play a critical role based on awareness. Through farm to fork, new labels, I think should facilitate this process. And we can find, if we take a look at the strategy, there are several points in the farm to fork action plan that relate to communication. In the chapter promotes sustainable food consumption, facilitating the shift towards healthy, sustainable diets, we find some interesting actions. The first one, proposal for an harmonized mandatory front of pack nutrition labeling to enable consumers to make health-conscious food choices. But I have a doubt. It is in order to promote the idea of the traffic lights label. I hope it isn't, but I'm not sure. The second, proposal to require origin indication for certain products. I don't know if it's really necessary. We already have a regulation for the use of marks of typicity in Europe. Then we have a proposal for a sustainable food labeling framework to empower consumers to make sustainable food choices. In details, a commission will examine ways to create a sustainable labeling framework that covers the nutritional, climate, environmental, and social aspect of food products. It seems to be very, very complicated for me. Then we have a review of the EU school scheme legal framework with a view to refocus the scheme on healthy and sustainable food. I think this is very important. I think we need an European food education program. And in the chapter, last but not least, in the chapter Reduce Food Lost and Waste, we find proposal for a revision of EU rules on date marking, use by and best before dates. I think it's really necessary. Finally, I want to present some questions that I think it's important to consider now for the future. What should the purpose of the label be? Directing the choice, but by substituting the citizen critical thinking or providing sufficient information so that the citizen can freely choose? Of course, I hope for the second. Are we sure that the label really has to tell everything about a product? Which nutritional and health claims are really useful? And I read some new research. Most of people can't understand the real significance of the claim. This is the reality. Are there different and more effective forms of communication? Could online shopping be an opportunity to communicate in a different way? I think so. Food education, can it be a keyword for the future? I don't know really the answer, but I'm sure we need simplicity. And in conclusion, I want to remember what the Greek sculptor Constantin Brancusi said. Simplicity is complexity resolved, not avoided. And I think that we think too much to traffic lights claims. We avoid the complexity and we don't solve it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Giorgio. Thank you so much, Professor Donegani, and thank you so much also for managing the presentation and the PowerPoint. We're back here. Well, you said very many things that probably, and I want to remind everybody, connected on Zoom, not on Facebook. If you're following us on Facebook, it's great. But if you want to make questions, please jump on Zoom, and you can either chat or there is a question and answer section where you can leave all your question and answer, and your question, and we're going to answer right away after Miss Aude speech shortly. I heard a lot of claps coming from the internet. Actually, I got an information from the broadband here that the internet, because of your speech, was very much appreciated. You touched very many aspects, Giorgio. You know, the one of simplicity, that probably we definitely deserve simplicity. You talk about trust. I don't want to go into the traffic light, otherwise we enter into the impossible long discussion. You talk about the fact that consumers or citizens should have critical thinking, and it goes back to the other elements you mentioned about the fake news and science. And there's a paradox that we started, you know, till March we were talking about fake news, and then from March with the pandemic, we moved from fake news into loving science because of all these virologists on TV, on the media, and so on. But then we started doubting about science because there is no truth or stable truth or final truth about the COVID-19. And this is also applying to food when you said the media or business is running faster than science. And this is, I want everybody that is following us to think that most of the studies that are mentioned today on the media regarding the COVID-19 are not peer-reviewed. Most of them are not peer-reviewed. They are taken and given to us. And then therefore, we don't find that final truth about the virus. And that's an issue that we should consider. Again, when the consumer is going shopping, where is the information coming from? Who's providing the information? Is that a real critical thinking? And then, of course, you mentioned, and there is the beginning of your speech, something extremely important that has to do with health, the environment, and ethic. And here is where labels in the farm to fork framework should be designed: health, environment or sustainability, and ethic. And all of this makes sustainability. But the question I have with Aude, and then I leave the floor to her, is how do we measure, which are the criteria to measure sustainability, and how this is going to be designed within the farm to fork framework? And I know you have a presentation, Aude, so let's see if you can pass the Zoom exam too. This is a 101 Zoom class. Not Zumba, Zoom class.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, now we can. Wonderful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your introduction, Pietro, and also Giorgio, for your very insightful presentation. Especially for me as a lawyer, it's so interesting to see how the perception of the consumer actually evolves, and if food legislation fit with it or not. What I suggest to do with you now is to going through the main proposals of that are included in the farm to fork strategy, and that will have a direct impact on labels and claims. As Giorgio explained, farm to fork strategy is actually the heart of the EU Green Deal. It emerged from a communication of the Commission end of May this year. And there are 4 objectives behind the farm to fork strategy: promoting sustainable food production, supporting sustainable food processing and distribution, reaching sustainable food consumption, and preventing food loss and waste. And this is in this context, actually, that various legislative and non-legislative proposals will emerge from the Commission in the next couple of years. The main proposals of the Commission will relate to setting nutrient profiles, laying down a harmonized mandatory front of pack labeling schemes, extending origin labeling, revising this marking as Giorgio mentioned, also establishing a EU code of conduct for responsible business and marketing practice, and last but not least, indeed, laying down the framework for a sustainable food labeling scheme. I suggest to focus on a couple of initiatives, namely nutrient profiles, front of pack labeling schemes, and sustainable labeling framework. When it comes to the nutrient profiles, what is the objective here of the Commission is to restrict the promotion of foods that are high in salt, sugars, or fat, by basically setting thresholds above which food products will no longer be able to promote their product by using nutrition or health claims. The current situation is that actually nutrient profiles, as you all may know, were due by 2009 under the Nutrition and Health Claims Regulation. And actually, they were never been able to be established because of high divergent opinion between member states, and especially because each member state has its own cultures, food culture, and could not accept that certain of their historical food product could not bear any nutrition and health claims. So what happened in the meantime? No global nutrient profiles, but specific nutrient profiles were included in the condition for the use of individual nutrition claim or health claims. So let's take an example. If you want to claim reduced in sugar, then you have to check whether the total energy of your product is not above the energy of similar product on the market. If it is above, you cannot make the claim. So this is a kind already of nutrient profile. And also in the meantime, various front of pack labeling schemes were developed. We'll speak about this in a few minutes. But some of those labeling schemes already includes nutrient profile, already include specific thresholds for salt, sugar, fat, etc. Nevertheless, in May 2020, the Commission issued a report in the context of the fitness check of nutrition and health claims and states that nutrient profiles are actually still relevant. So this is one of the reasons that setting nutrient profiles is included in the farm to fork strategy. But concretely, I do not see real reason why we will reach an agreement now on nutrient profile while it was totally aborted back in 2009. Concretely, national protection for gastronomy and so on remains the same, even stronger than before, in my view. Setting nutrient profile today has also the risk to contradict the schemes that have already been developed and the individual nutrient profile included in certain nutrition claims or health claims. And also there is this risk that certain products can be really subject of discrimination. Why? Because we understand that the idea of the Commission behind setting nutrient profile actually is to push food business operators to reformulate certain products. But what about raw material? What about agricultural products that cannot be reformulated? Let's think of meats, of cheese. It's just impossible. So those products certainly have the risk to be discriminated vis-à-vis other composed products such as the muesli, for instance. Let's now focus on the initiative on front of pack labeling that will be proposed by the Commission. So the Commission will propose a mandatory labeling schemes. The objective behind that is to enable consumers to make health-conscious food choices. Okay. We know that currently there already are various models of front of pack labeling schemes. Let's think of the Keyhole in the northern country, the Healthy Choice in the Netherlands, the Nutri-Score in Belgium, Germany, France, and soon in Luxembourg, also the traffic light labeling. So there is a variety of models. Of course, there is this issue of impeding the internal market with the coexistence of all those labels. But the real challenge now of the Commission will be to actually identify which kind of front of pack labeling scheme the consumer needs, because we have on the one side those that constitute an additional form of expression of the nutrition declaration. This may be the case for the traffic light labeling, but there are also evaluative front of pack labeling schemes such as the Nutri-Score, which give a score to the food, a global score, and which actually says this food is good and this is supposedly not good. So this is, I think, the main challenge of the Commission here, and also for the food business operators' point of view, but also from a consumer point of view. The new contemplated front of pack labeling scheme will be mandatory. And what will be the future of all those labels that are developed for years, that have been developed for years, and that are understood by the consumer? We will have a potential issue of coexistence here. Also, we may have a possible contradiction between front of pack labeling schemes and nutrient profiles, because some front of pack labeling schemes may constitute a nutrition claim. The Nutri-Score, score A and B, are considered as being nutrition claims. So what if the criteria that are taken into account for the Nutri-Score actually contradicts the one of the nutrient profiles? We may have an issue here. And as a last focus, I would like to discuss with you the initiative that is contemplated by the Commission on sustainable food labeling framework and on laying down criteria for harmonized criteria for green claims. The objective of a sustainable framework is, as Giorgio explained, to cover various aspects: nutritional, climate, environmental, and social aspect of food product. It's a kind of certification that really gives the green light to consumer. You may purchase and consume this product. It's ethical, it's qualitative, and it's good for your health. Actually, this is the reasoning behind this label. And also the criteria, the Commission intends to set up criteria related to voluntary claims. When we think of the current situation, we think there is no legal condition. This is something that will be totally new for EU food business operators, because so far, when it comes to voluntary labeling, they are, and the stakeholders are referring to private initiatives. Regarding sustainability, there are collective trademarks, such as the RSPO for palm oil, the Fair Trade, Rainforest Alliance, and so on and so on. Also, with respect to green claims, there are no legal conditions in relation thereto, but there are guidelines of the European Commission that are given in the context of unfair business to consumer commercial practices. It's a kind of question of common sense. And in this respect, what do I see as a challenge is first the criteria to take into account, to set up such labeling framework that will cover nutritional, climate, environmental, and social aspects. In my view, this is like having the challenge of the nutrient profile, but duplicated to climate, environmental, and social, because just let's think of an environmental claim. You do not have to, you have to take into account the land use, but also the water aspect, pesticide aspects. So there are so many criteria to take into account that even if they are laid on paper, today it's nearly impossible for a private business to ensure that it will meet the criteria to make the claim. And also having European criteria may potentially contradict with the existing international labels and certification, and may have an impact on also international trade or the specific certification of food business operators. And so what should we aim for? Just a few thoughts. and the objective is, of course, to open a discussion with you. Of course, I welcome the objective behind the strategy. It has fair objective, but in my view, attention should be paid to 3 points, 3 main points. First, the fact that we already have a very complex regulatory framework when it comes to labels and claim and promoting food products and so on. So this is something that we have to take into account. And in this context, attention should be paid to having a holistic approach. So the Commission should really contemplate adopting legislative acts, I mean, nearly in one act, you know, in order to avoid contradiction between text and schemes. And also the international context is not a small issue, because a lot of commodities such as cocoa, coffee, and so on actually come from third countries, and the EU rules may have an impact on the production rules of all those small farmers and producers. So the global objective is to avoid confusion, to avoid contradiction between the text, because otherwise labels will be confusing for the consumer, a food business operator will be subject to legal uncertainty, and then also risk of interpretation will lead to national interpretation, which will lead to various interpretation among member states, which is of course not the objective of the farm to fork strategy. Thank you for your attention, and Pietro.
Thank you, Aude. Please just jump off your presentation so we can go again full screen. Well, you asked questions. I don't want to talk, so I'm opening the floor for everybody to make questions. So please go ahead with all the questions. If you have questions, if you're on Facebook, you cannot. If you're here with us, you can definitely go for questions. Thanks, Aude, because you said questions, but here you were supposed to help us. Actually, you did, but by asking many more questions that we are going to face, or we should face in the next months. I'm going back to Giorgio while I'm waiting for questions to come from our audience. Giorgio, you spoke about education, and you spoke about the role of science, the role of consumers. Can consumers develop a critical thinking? Where is the role here when you have so much? Because there's so much information. Aude was clear. The certification for sustainability can be about biodiversity, can be about pesticides, can be about everything. In one sense, the European Commission seemed to create one single certificate for everything, but of course that's not possible, luckily. We need competition, we need diversity, but this diversity is creating a lot of confusion. How will consumers and how can company deal this much confusion? And I know it's a big question that we'll probably not be able to answer, but you are here to help us answering.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think it's a cultural approach we need to this question, because I can show you just one. I flew on this scheme, but I think it's good for answer to your question. Here we are living a particular moment of the life of the humanity, here in Europe especially, and we can experiencing a terrible distance from the moment on productions and the moment of consumption of food. For this little girl is impossible, rather impossible, to connect the cake she is eating to a field of wheat like this, no? And this lack of meaning is lack of awareness, no? Is the real point we have to we we have to work on an educational floor. We need, for all you said about sustainability, about nutrition, about healthy, about all these kinds, you can't, we have to put the citizen in the middle of our focus. We don't have to give to citizens too much information, but only the information citizens need to make conscious choices. So I have a dream. I have a food, a product, a canned food with a label, and all you need to make your idea of quality of this food, you can find it simply in a few words, but not simplicity, not avoided the complexity, but solve it in a few words. You can, to be free to choose, talking about nutritional label. We have a nutritional label today, and they declare calories, declare fat, declare protein, declare carbohydrate, sugar, and salt. And we have to put ourselves in a direction. Which are the main problems, healthy problems and nutritional healthy problems of the people now? Obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. No? So it's not so important that I write on the label how much of this nutrient, iron or something else, or folate or something other it contains. People must be put in the condition to understand clearly that it's very strong calories food, but not in order to avoid it, but in order to balance it during the day with another choice. So it's a problem of priority and education. We can write few words, but the most important thing is the people can understand these words, I think.
In other words, thank Giorgio. In other words, you're saying that the Commission should allow to write eat and run.
Or
of course, to the
eat
gym.
and run, but these are the most important things.
we like to joke here, and who knows me and the competitors that would love also to take this with irony. But there's a bunch of questions. There's one, and I'm moving to Aude because otherwise we run out of time. There's a question coming from Margot. Margot's asking, should the legal framework regulate the free from claims? It's a big question, huh?
Yeah, big question. Actually, the free from claims issue has not been included in the farm to fork strategy. So it is not. And I suppose that the question behind that is the issue of free from claim something which is part of sustainable nutrition. Actually, this is a very sensitive issue because we are, and as indicated in the beginning of the presentation, now it's free from peanuts, free from lactose, free from palm oil, etc., etc. And actually, it's more the communication should be more positive. If we do a parallel with what exists in the cosmetics world, for cosmetics we do have guidelines from a working group of the Commission, which expressly targets the issue of free from claims without necessarily adding additional rules in this respect. So the question, do we need rules? I don't think we need rules in that respect, but it's a question of context. And what the guidelines of the related to cosmetics products say, they say, if you highlight the absence of an ingredient which has the purpose of informing the consumer because it may, the consumer may be allergic to a certain substance, this information is purely informative. Okay, and this is the same for food, without lactose, free from gluten, etc. If the objective of the claim, the free from claim, is to mention and emphasize the absence of an ingredient that is subject to specific perception, a negative perception from the consumer, then it becomes clear that the intention of the operator, the intention behind the free from claim is to say, my product is better because it does not contain parabens in the case of cosmetics. And then it is expressly stated in those guidelines, then the claim becomes denigrating and unfair, and it is therefore prohibited. And we actually may make a parallel with the foods. It's exactly the same reasoning. If you mention free from an allergen substance, then it's purely informative. If you mention free from sugar, it's a nutrition claim. If you mention free from any ingredient that is controversial, then it's to emphasize that your product is better than a product without this, and you have to prove it. You have to prove it. That's my view.
So that's the challenge of proving it. Particularly, this is very true when the environmental aspect is involved and you have a sustainable version of what you have been replacing. Why should you say I've been replacing this when you have a 100% sustainable version of that? Of course, then we can discuss about the criteria of sustainability or the certification beyond sustainability. So that's a case that we'll be facing. Unusually, but very unusually, I have a question live from Mr. Tugar's seat again. So I will allow him to talk. That's something we don't do, but since it happened, let's see if we can, if it works. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Pietro. Yeah, thank you, Pietro. I mean, I was just asking myself. I mean, you're talking about sustainability from from both sides. Aude and Giorgio also talking about sustainability. Why is this EU is making everything sustainability? If that sustainability has to be has to be in place, will this sustainability also applies for EU products such as dairy products, rapeseed, or even wine? Will there be a certificate that we see on the wine bottle to say that this is certified sustainability by some such and such as what we have with RSPO, CSPO now? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're great because this has worked. I'm coming back to Aude, and then we go to Giorgio, and then we have to conclude. But I see there are two other questions. Let me see them. One is from CH Tawa. Sorry for my pronunciation. And here I see that we are going to the palm oil discussion. Is free from palm oil a fair claim? And then we have another one for G. Krem. Guys, you're using all these nicknames that are impossible to understand. Do you think that the new labeling system derived from F2F strategy could exacerbate existing conflicts between EU member states or between EU and other countries? So let's start, Aude, first with from Tugar, then we go down to G. Krem, and then to Teho.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure to have fully understood the question of Tugar, as the sound was not so good. Maybe you could summarize or?
Yes, what Tugar, this is the funny situation. Were you listening to that? No, I wasn't. Of course I was listening. Tugar's question was regarding the fact that EU is probably putting a certification scheme that regards, I assume, from its provenience on palm oil, and whether this is going to apply other European products or is going to just regard to what you said earlier to raw materials that are coming from third parties. I assume that's the question.
the idea of the Commission intention is to apply to well, that the criteria that they will lay down will apply to all products. But this is precisely the challenge, because laying down criteria for all kind of products request actually to have data regarding all possible environmental impacts of climate impact, etc. So I don't know what will be the methodology of the Commission, if they will start from criteria, for instance, of the US Bureau, and to apply them to other commodities such as coffee or cocoa, but I cannot imagine that some product could be excluded from the criteria related to green cane.
Yeah, and the same, I assume, the big question, as you said earlier, will regard the certification, because Mr. Togar is coming from the palm oil industry. Palm oil is probably the commodity with the largest number of certifications. So even there, we need a criteria to understand what is, you know, the good certification, what is not the good certification, what is the criteria to become an accepted certification, and often how you can compare certification of very different commodities, you know, because the sustainability of palm oil and cocoa might be different from the sustainability of another commodity. I'm coming still to you, and this is, let's say, more a legal question. Could the new labeling system could exacerbate existing conflicts between EU member states or between EU and other countries, I assume regions outside of the EU?
Well, I anticipate that the discussions will, of course, be intense and that we'll have animation, because there is a kind of, in my view, kind of contradiction between this initiative, this willingness to have EU legal framework, one fits for all member states, while we see renationalization of a lot of issues in the context of food law. Let's think of country of origin labeling, the various front of pack labeling schemes. I mean, concretely, just with the example of front of pack labeling schemes, if member states would have shared the same views on what an appropriate food labeling scheme could be, then we already would have all the same front of pack labeling scheme. And this is not the case. Italy just mentioned that it would like to develop a new and different front of pack labeling scheme, which is different from the one existing in France, existing in the UK, existing in the northern country. So the discussions will be the same. So the answer to the question is yes, I think so.
Yeah, and before getting to the last question very briefly, we shouldn't forget that on some issues we saw how single countries are taking some steps, but then they say, even at the government level, well, the EU has something to say. And then you go at the Brussels level and they say, for instance, when it comes to the free from, they say, well, national countries can do it. So we get to that kind of confusion where, of course, consumers are in between, and you know, they are the one paying the price. But Aude, very briefly, I know this is going more on the personal side, so you can tweet and say just personal view here. Since there is a question by Tejo, is it free from palm oil a fair claim?
It's a good question. It's a topic that I actually very well know. I am fairly convinced that this is not a fair claim, because I am, yes, intimately convinced that the reasoning behind this claim is, my product is better, please buy it because it does not contain palm oil. And there is no food business operator that is capable to demonstrate that the product is better because it does not contain palm oil. And that is, for me, a very, that is a big issue. And the big issue also, as you mentioned, is that with respect to the free from claims, where you see that other countries, third countries have adopted specific guidelines with respect to the use of free from claim. When you see that even for cosmetics products, official guidelines of the Commission are in place, I cannot impede, I cannot think otherwise that there are political reasons behind this lack of position from the Commission or any member states.
Yeah, and that's very true, particularly when we think that there is a sustainable, if we talk about sustainability. I took it away because it is not sustainable, but there is a sustainable version of that. And the other aspects we have to keep in mind, if we look at the broader picture, since we're in the COVID-19 crisis, is also, as we said, 7.6 billion people, they want food, they need to farm food. And on the other side, there is that sustainability element. And we need to find a balance to, allow people to prosper. And we need to find those foods that allow people to intake the right calories, not too many calories, but the right calories. And of course, to do it in a sustainable way. And we should understand that. But coming to you, Giorgio, before ending, first of all, since this is a fair question, and it was about the free from palm oil, but any free from, do you think these are fair claims, first of all? And second, you've wrote a beautiful book that is in Italian. I assume you're translated that in English as well, about the free from claims. You wrote it with your daughter, so a great job. Are these fair claims?
No, I agree with Aude. I don't think they are fair claims. We can take free from palm oil like a study case. In Italy, every palm oil was the devil. And it's very dangerous because palm oil, for instance, is good for industries because it's very comfortable to use, very useful, it's very flexible, it's very cheap. So if we talk about sustainability, we have to consider also economic and social sustainability. And also it's very sustainable because the palm oil needs very few amount of soil to grow. And why the war against the palm oil? Because other nations invested on other kind of oil, and also we live in a world that is dominated by communication. A journal here in Italy was in a crisis, economic crisis, and invented a petition and invented this war against palm oil. And I want to conclude my with my speech with this: industries can't remain in second row. Because I really suffered when a very big company said, I know palm oil is safety and also healthy for young people because palmitic acid is the most important acid in a baby's body. But I know it's healthy, but you don't want it. So we put it out of our products. This is not an industry that dialogue in the right way, in the right manner with the people.
Thank you so much, Giorgio, for this beautiful presentation. Thank you so much, Aude. I'm so delighted, so proud to have great speakers. I'm learning a lot. Probably, I'm running these webinars, as my team says, to learn, and I'm actually learning. I hope that all our guests, as very many of them, have learned today, either on Facebook or here on Zoom. Please keep following us. We have a bunch of webinars before summer coming up in Italian, probably one or two more in English. They are always very exciting. We're coming back with a sustainable nutrition very soon. And with Aude and Giorgio, we have definitely to go into details because the discussion has not even started yet, as to start. So this is just an idea. And I think it has to be a very intense and very democratic as we do in a liberal democracy debate. And again, we can't just analyze or solve it in Europe, because this is sustainability is a global issue, and we have to solve it and we have to discuss it at the global level, because most of the population, most of the land is outside of Europe. So as I said, you know, we have an easy life to tear down monuments here in Europe, but you know, real life is also outside of Europe, and we have to deal with that, and we have to grow with that, and we have to educate each other and learn from each other. And this is what we're trying to do here at Competere. So we are live on Facebook. We will be recorded, and again, you can watch it again, or you know, enjoy our recording very shortly. There will be video clips as well posted online and on our website. Keep following us. Thank you very much, Aude, for being with us. Great job. And thank you, Giorgio, again for being here with us. If you want to follow their presentation, or if you want to get in touch with them, please contact us, and we will definitely put you in touch with these two beautiful speakers. Thanks, everybody. And again, don't forget our mask with our logo. Thank you, everybody. See you very soon, and enjoy the summer.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao.